all sorts of ideas thrown together, mixed up, pulled out, and this is the story. Hello, welcome to I Read This Book with Chris. This is Chris. This is the book. Today we shall be discussing Christmas Stars, a science fiction Christmas short story anthology. While discussing this, I have some hot cider. This is maybe one of my new favorite things, this book. So it's Christmas Stars, the best of Christmas past, present, and yet to come. Edited by David G. Hartwell. Fantastic Tales of Yuletide Wonder by Ray Bradbury, Arthur C. Clarke, William Gibson, Anne McCafferty, Gene Wolfe, and many others. Cover doesn't look super great, but the closer as you get, first off, you see exactly what it is. There you go. Santa Claus. He's got a little space helmet. He's in his sled. And then all the reindeer, they have little space helmets too. And little suits that perfectly match the reindeer. It is a pretty cool anthology. It's an anthology, just a short story collection. So this is published in 1992. And it collects... There really should be more of these. There probably are somewhere. But I don't really see a whole lot of them. I go through a lot of sci-fi. Get into a lot of different science fiction, or used bookstores that have science fiction. I have a lot of random old sci-fi books. And this is the only one that I know of. It has different stories that are published, that have different copyright dates. Let's see, 1950, 1973, 1984, 1952, 1986, 1970. So a lot of, looks like he just went around and found a lot of stories that were Christmas, science fiction stories, and put them together. A lot of these are the 80s, but a lot of them are earlier than that. It's published 1992. Another thing that I like about this collection is there are 25 stories, which basically makes this an advent calendar for all your science fiction fans. So every day you can start December 1st, and every day read a different story. You have one story every day from first all the way up to Christmas, all with different takes about what a science fiction story would be. There are some that are like political intrigue. Like one of them, there's assassination attempts about Santa, and all his elves are coming together trying to figure out which of his elves is trying to assassinate Santa. Sanity Claus, which is like 1984-ish themed, sort of dystopian. The Christmas Trombone, let's see, that's a fun one, where basically what if all music is now perfected by this machine that takes music, hears it, and then makes it perfect, so then no one wants to hear the human version of it anymore because there's a perfect version of it. There's all sorts of different ones. The one that I want to talk about, When Jesus Comes Down the Chimney by Ian Watson. Alrighty, so I'm going to read off a couple of different sections of this that I found fun. It's basically just about 4 pages of mass market paperback size. If you do get the book, it's page 89 already. We all know how Santa Claus was born in a humble stable amongst the chickens and goats. Most of his country folk were poor, and Santa's parents were no exception. No shoes on their feet, no fine cakes in the larder. No larders, often. A lot of these people lived in tents, and it got pretty cold in the winter. 3 magicians had hiked 1,000 miles to be present when Santa was born. They followed a bright comet in the sky and brought a magic sack as a gift. You could take whatever you wished for out of the sack. Santa's mother didn't want to stir up jealousy amongst her neighbors, so she hid the sack away. Anyway, her country was being occupied by the Roman army. If the Romans heard of the magic sack, she feared they'd take it away for their wild, greedy emperor. Skipping a little bit. But Jesus cried out, "The gifts I bring you are dialectical." This was a term which Jesus borrowed from the Greek philosophers. Your desires are the thesis. This sack is the antithesis. The synthesis is that you should empty yourselves of false goals, vain dreams, the product of a diseased society. Just you empty all that false consciousness of yours into this sack. It will hold everything, reduce everything that is contradictory. In its place, you'll discover that gifts ought to be given according to one's needs, not one's desires. But society at present is based on legalized theft, on the alienation of people from their soil, from their work, even from their own bodies and sexuality. With daily repetition, Jesus' message began to sink in. Soon a few of the plebeians believed him and stepped into the sack and out again as a symbol of their change of heart. Then many. The emperor's curiosity was piqued, for the circus seats remained empty, and the elephants and the trained apes which rode them wept. On the way there, the emperor, now we must tell the truth, he was a hysteric but also cunningly sensed his own political and economic infrastructure ebbing away. The emperor experienced a visionary fit. He saw a sack in the sky which swallowed the sun. Actually, we believe this was a total eclipse. When he reached the Forum, he dismounted from his horse and stepped into the sack. Soon the empire had totally changed into a republic. There's two ways to read this story. Well, there's three ways to read the story. One is, it's just a bunch of gobbledygook mixing a bunch of stuff together. But what I like to think about is, so published 1992. A lot of these stories are from the 80s. This story is from the 1986. So if you think about 1980s Christmas, our modern American Christmas is not the way Christmas has always been celebrated. Christmas has been celebrated for a long time, but the way that we have now, with Santa Claus, with gifts, with all this stuff, is modern. When the Puritans came to America, they rejected Christmas because, one, they rejected basically all of the Catholic papist holidays. But another one is Christmas was a day for feasting. And for feasting meant drinking, and drinking meant drunkenness. And so a lot of people would go and take Christmas, and they wouldn't work, and they would drink and get drunk. Feast. And if you think of Christmas, most people who think of Christmas nowadays don't think of drinking and getting drunk. I'm saying this to say Christmas is not always now. Christmas now is not always the way it has been. The idea of having Santa Claus come and give you gifts, and having gifts and all this stuff. The modern idea of Christmas is really only a couple hundred years old. Before that, it was a feast day, like a lot of other feast days. We, as modern people, especially Americans, celebrating Christmas, how do we know that the stories we have about things are the way that things happen? In this story, he mixes up several different ideas and throws them all together. Obviously, there's Jesus and Santa Claus, and he switches the idea of them a little bit, where Santa Claus was the one who died and was born in a stable, and then he died, and then Jesus is sort of in the position of the Apostle Paul and the later church, coming afterwards to preach the gospel, whatever this gospel is. Except this gospel is Greek, it's got dialectical, it's got later philosophical terms. This is the antithesis. And the thesis and the antithesis, and together they come into synthesis, right? Like, these are not terms that we normally do. And the way society is based on legalized theft, like, you got some socialist ideas in there. All sorts of ideas thrown together, mixed up, pulled out, and this is this story. And our modern version of Santa Claus is basically this. Santa Claus, known as Saint Nick, also known as Kris Kringle, there's a lot of different aliases, lives at the North Pole, gives gifts. It's mixing together different traditions from all sorts of different places. And then we celebrate that on Christmas. But Christmas is Jesus' birthday, the day he was born. And even the story of Jesus and his birthday, like the day of which Jesus was born, Christmas, the original Christmas, the story that we tell of Christmas is a synthesis, is a brought together of the different gospel stories and putting them together in order to make one cohesive story. And this doesn't mean this story is incorrect because it's not told any one place the way that we now celebrate it. It just means that we take things and we put them together to make sense in a certain way. So what does this mean? I think it's telling us a couple of things. Two things both of which can be taken too far. One of which, I think the proper thing we should be doing is holding our ideas and our traditions lightly. Santa Claus is not real. St. Nicholas was real. The stories that we have about St. Nicholas, some of those are real and some of those are not. And then from St. Nicholas and his example, we then get the tradition of Santa Claus. If we hold on to things lightly, we can accept that Santa Claus is not real. However, he is important. He can be important for Christmas without being real. If we take it too far, it can be very skeptical in the way that Santa Claus isn't real. None of this is real. None of this matters in a very, very skeptical, dangerous way. So we should hold on to things lightly. That's one side. And the other side is that these things, is that stories matter. If you are someone, so if we take the three different things that we can see in here, Santa Claus, Christmas, some sort of socialism, whereas he's like, the idea of legalized, that society is based off legalized threat, that you should get what you need, not what you want. But if you take those three ideas, Jesus and socialism and Santa, which of these ideas do you hold to be true? And do you treat them in the same way that you treat these other ideas? For example, if you believe Jesus is real and he came down, the whole Orthodox Christian view, the whole traditional Christian view, Jesus was born, he died to save the world. If you believe that to be true, that Jesus, all that, and you tell it in the same veracity, the same truthfulness, the same story, in the same way that you talk about Santa Claus, people are going to question, and by people, lots of kids are going to question, why are you speaking this way about one thing and not the other? I've heard a lot of people say things like, they go and they tell lies about Santa. Jesus is the same thing as Santa. God is the same thing as Santa. It's a story that we tell in order to get people to act properly. And if you are the person who teaches these both in the same way, but you leave one to be true and one not to be true, it's a little confusing. Or if you are a socialist, you could also believe Jesus is real and socialism is true. Those are two things you could believe as well. But let's say you believe Jesus was only kind of a story, but socialism is real. Like, you want to make sure that the one that you believe is real and true and good is a story that you tell in a different way than you tell the other ones. What am I trying to say? So there's two things you should get out of here. One, which is you should take your history and traditions lightly. And two, you should take your stories seriously. Because if you don't take your stories seriously, and you don't separate what is a story and what is truth, and what stories are true and what stories are not true, and if you tell them in the same way, over time, your stories and your traditions can get mixed up in this strange way, where if you take a Christian from 1500 and you put them into a modern Christmas, they are probably going to get very confused. What about this fits to their story and their understanding of Christmas, and what if that is not? So you should take it lightly, but you should also take it seriously. And you can take either one of these too far, I think. If you take it too lightly, then you'll just question everything. And if you take it too seriously and you treat all of your stories with the same level of seriousness, even though they don't all deserve it, I think that's a dangerous thing too. You need to be able to differentiate what stories are good and true and useful, and which stories are just fun, maybe useful, and be able to separate them and know the difference. It also makes you wonder how much you can know what is true from the past. We have traditions about how stories are. I guess this goes back to the first point. We have traditions, and the traditions say this happened a certain way. How do we know these traditions are true or accurate or good? There's some truth to it, obviously, but obviously it's also not 100% true and accurate. Anyway,